Welcome to Manifested Publishers.
Hello, students. I welcome once again to our today's lesson. I hope you are continuing well and you are coping on well with your studies. Today we are going to have a lesson in history and government, a topic that we had started looking at or studying in our previous topic, that is international relations. That is the topic that we are handling. That is the second topic in the Form 4 History and Government syllabus. In our previous lesson, we introduced the topic international relations. We said that this is a period or when countries started to come together to unite and forge peaceful relations or peaceful interactions after the effects of the Second World War. We said the wars brought a lot of harm in the countries. So the countries or people started to find ways in which they would interact. One nation could interact with another and be able to make sure that there is international peace. The biggest reason for the nations to come together was to make sure that there is international peace. And in our previous lesson, as you can remember, my dear learner, we mentioned the different ways, the different methods in which countries interact with one another. Can you remember the ways in which we discussed in our previous lesson? The first one was political interactions. We mentioned that countries with ideologies came together, and even those that had conflicting ideologies were able to interact cordially or peacefully. The next one was economic relations. The third one was diplomatic relations, that is the sending of ambassadors or diplomats. And then we mentioned the social cultural interactions. And then lastly, we studied the international organizations, interactions based on international organizations. And we said an international organization is an organization that encompasses or has members from different countries in different continents. For example, you'd have an organization that has member countries from Africa, member countries from Asia, member countries from America, member countries from Europe. That is an international organization. So that brings us to our today's lesson. Today, we are going to start learning about one of the international organizations that was created to enhance efforts or to drum up efforts to make sure that there is international peace. Remember, a world war involved countries or conflicts between countries, and it involved most of the countries of the world. It was fought on different continents. Now, as opposed to the wars, now the countries were forging ways, or they forged organizations. They instituted organizations to bring the different countries of the world together. So that is what we are going to be discussing in our today's lesson. So today we are going to learn about the United Nations as an organization. Remember, this is an organization, international organization that was created to enhance peaceful. So what is the United Nations? The United Nations is an association of independent states. It is an association of independent states that that came together, is an association of independent states that came together with an aim of promoting international peace. We are saying that the United Nations is an association of independent states. I want you to note that they are independent states. Each state is independent. They have their own ways of life. They have their own constitution. They have their own government. So the United Nations is an association of independent states with an aim of promoting and maintaining international peace. That is the other thing that I really want you to note. International peace. So these independent states or sovereign countries have come together to form an association that is aimed at promoting and maintaining international peace. So all countries come together, irrespective of their political ideologies. Notwithstanding their political ideologies, and at that time, we had the capitalist ideology and the communist ideology, and then there now was the African socialism that was also instituted. So all these nations come together, irrespective of their political ideologies, irrespective of their culture, irrespective of their economic development. They do not consider what is your ideology. They do not consider what culture do you have. They do not consider what level of economic development are you in. They do not consider your political views. Right? So all nations, irrespective of how organized you are, or how powerful or how weak you are, this association brought all these nations together so that they could sit down and be able to discuss or interact with one another. So it was formed in a conference that was held in San Francisco, that is immediately in the USA. It was formed during a conference that was held in the USA in a city known as San Francisco. That was in 25th to 26th June of 1945. So immediately after the end of the Second World War, countries came together. They formed, there was a conference that was held here. There were representatives of different nations. There was Franklin Roosevelt, there was Winston Churchill, there was Joseph Stalin. Those are some of the world leaders at then who are leading the superpowers. And even all these other nations were invited, and they came together and decided to form this organization and instituted a charter. They instituted a charter, which is a kind of a constitution or an agreement that was supposed to be ascribed to or accepted by any nation that wanted to be a member of this organization. So these nations came together, led by their leaders. They made an agreement, or they decided to make peace, or make this organization to maintain the world peace. in this conference, there were representatives of over 50 countries that came together to ratify this charter or ratify this agreement that was made. So they decided to have their headquarters that where these organizations could be operating from. It is in New York, that is in the USA at the same time. So when these countries came together, they did not want to consider the differences they have, the economic strength of a nation. They did not want to consider that. Their main aim was to forge a way of maintaining international peace, as opposed to the organization that was formed after the First World War, which was the League of Nations, that was created as a way of punishing, right, the Allied powers or those who lost in the war. In this organization, or after the Second World War, they did not want to consider who won the war or who lost in the Second World War. They wanted to bring all of them, both losers and winners, so that they could come and work together and sort out their issues. So this was a way they thought, instead of us continuing to compete or fighting against each other. And they learned from the failures of the League of Nations that had happened immediately after the First World War. So now they included all the other countries. Imagine the first one, at the start of this organization, 50 countries. 50 countries accepted to join into this organization. So membership was open. Any member who wanted to join the organization was allowed to join. Open membership. So any member that could agree to the charter or the agreements or the points that they had raised to in view of maintaining peace. So any member that wanted to join in this membership was allowed to join or was given a time to join. So we are also going to be discussing in the next lesson the organization of these United Nations, which is abbreviated as the UN. Right? The UN. So they had to open membership to each and every country. So if a country felt like this is the right way to go, they were allowed to join. The admission for you to become a member or a nation going forward, there was an arm that was brought together that was referred to as the General Assembly. The General Assembly. This was an assembly or a time when the member states representatives, most commonly the presidents or the prime ministers, came together at an assembly. All countries meeting together at one point in one conference. So if a country wanted to join into the UN or the United Nations, he could that country was supposed to make a request or an application to the General Assembly, which is a body bringing together all the countries. So they would be able to look into the application and then register that new member into that organization. So currently they have the United Nations encompasses or has around 193 members. It has from 50. More countries have joined in, up to 193 members. Those are the countries that are party to the United Nations to this time. So we ask ourselves, this was the main idea of them coming together, maintaining and promoting the international peace. So apart from that, which are the other aims of the United Nations? So that is the next thing that we are going to be discussing, the aims of the United Nations. So we shall just be abbreviating it as UN. The objectives. The first one, as we have mentioned, is to maintain world peace. And we have already discussed that. That was their main aim, maintaining world peace and security. Maintaining world peace and security, that is the first one. And then number two, it was to promote peaceful relations. Promote peaceful relations among countries. Make sure that countries are able to relate with one another. And then respect and promote human rights. So this organization made an elaborate outline of the rights of humanity. Each and every person has what rights and freedoms that is contained in the UN Charter. So their other aim was to make sure that the rights and freedoms of individuals are maintained. And then also they had to promote social programs and living standards of people. Promote social programs. And living standards of people. Promotes social programs and living standards of people. So they institute different programs to make sure that the living standards of people, especially from poor nations, have been brought or have been uplifted. And also it is to prevent another war, prevent outbreak of another war. Prevent the outbreak of another world war. So it was to make sure the duty of the United Nations as an organization is to make sure that there is no any other world war that is going to exist or is going to break out in the world war. And also, number 6, protect the marginalized. The marginalized groups. Protect the interests of the marginalized groups. An example is women. Traditionally in our societies, women have not been given an equal opportunity as the men. So the United Nations was given the mandate, or they took upon themselves to make sure that the rights of women, for example, as a marginalized group, has been protected. Another marginalized groups are the children. They have also been protected. Others, another marginalized group that we can mention are those who are disabled, that they are given, their interests have been taken care of. And also promote economic reconstruction of member states. Promote economic reconstruction of member states. One of the biggest effects of the Second World War was that there was a lot of destruction of resources, infrastructure. Most of the countries were almost becoming bankrupt. So the duty of the United Nations was to maintain or make sure that the economies have been reconstructed and there is continued peace. And then lastly, you can mention it is to promote international cooperation. Promote international cooperation. That is the next aim or objective of the United Nations. It is to promote international cooperation. So those are just some of the duties or the aims of the United Nations. They are quite varied, and we are going to be discussing more when we look at the organization or structure of the United Nations. So these are just a mention of some of the aims. You can also do more research and find out what are the other aims of the United Nations. So as we end our lesson today, let me give you a question, a revision question for you to work out as you continue to study. So let us look at our revision questions. The first question is, where is the headquarters of UN located? So in which city? Where is the headquarters of the United Nations located? And then number 2, outline the aims of the United Nations. Outline the aims of the United Nations. And my dear learner, I'm sure you are well able to discuss or mention those aims that we have just listed as being the objectives or the aims of the United Nations. So that brings us to the end of our lesson today. Bye-bye.